So today is a class for standard and higher level students. So if you can show it with your hands, who is a standard level student? Okay, good. We have few standard level students. After this class, you don't need to come to the class until about the end of November. But I will let you know. I will let you know beforehand because it may be earlier, it may be later. So we won't see you for about 3 months or 2 months and a half.
But once the
That's so sad.
In October we will have the midterm test, and in November we have the block week examination. So you will be having, or actually I will post the information in the classroom before the test, so you will be aware of when those tests are. If I have the dates tomorrow, I will actually post them, so take notes on them because I think the midterm is gonna be the first week of October. So that's coming up in about 2 weeks and a half. Okay.
Oh my God.
So you will know from me as soon as I have the dates. Good. But today we want actually standard level students to help us, so that's why you are here. Thank you for coming. You will learn something new, by the way, because at the end we have a time for reflection and to understand what did we learn today. And even if you don't get into the deeper theories that we will actually learn from the experiment that we're doing today, there may be something that you may have learned today by helping us. Okay, so thanks for high level students. So this is the last chapter. I would say the most not difficult, but let's say maybe a very important chapter in microeconomics that high level students will have, because of course it's long, as you can tell, it's about 3 months, and also is mainly the only thing that separates you from the standard level knowledge. So you may expect questions related to these topics in paper 1, paper 2, and or paper 3. So maybe the 3 papers will have content related with this, or maybe not, who knows, because the IB is unpredictable. But at least I would expect something related with these topics. And the topics are called, or the chapter is called by the IB, market power. We call it actually in theory, we call it theory of the firm. But we are not going as much as theory of the firm. We will cover cost theory and we will cover market structures. We're gonna learn new models. We're gonna use some mathematics for the models, nothing complicated, nothing really actually. The math that we're using is so basic that for those who love math, you will say that's not math. And for those who don't like math, you will say, I can do this. Okay, we don't really use calculus, even if we could have used calculus for this, but we won't. The other thing is that today we're actually starting with a simulation. Is an exercise that will help us to understand the theories, because these theories, we could just start directly with the theory, and what I have heard from the students is that this experiment that we're doing today helped them a lot to understand how the theory is applied in reality, and how reality or how the experiment helps us to relate the theory with. Okay, so they actually recall the experiment that we're doing today around the whole chapter. So even if we go to market structures, we will still remember what we're doing today. Okay, so I keep doing it. I keep kind of tweaking it and making it more towards Pearson, environment. This experiment actually was developed by Harvard, and they use it for business and actually use it to talk about productivity, efficiency, competition, etc. So we're actually modifying a little bit for Pearson environment, and yeah, you will see how much you can learn from that. And another thing is that for those who really like business, for those who are going to business in the university, this is the closest that we'll get into business. Okay, the IB is not really business syllabus, but we're gonna understand a little more how business take decisions, how firms take decisions, and actually we're going to talk about cost, revenues, and profits. Okay, so let's start with these 3 definitions: cost, revenues, and profits, and then we're going to explain what's going to happen, and then we're going to start with this chapter. Today we have actually Stephanie joining us. Thank you, Stephanie, for coming. She likes to join us and also to mingle with you and get to know you in the classroom, because she also knows you maybe outside of the classroom, but today she will be helping us actually to be a judge, and we'll explain what does that mean. So thank you, Stephanie. So let's start with some definitions, and then we're gonna start with the explanation of the whole thing. How would you define costs in the context of economics so far? Your own definition of costs. Yeah.
The values of factors of production that a firm use.
Good. Let's use that. The monetary value of the factors of production. Can someone remind us what are the 4 monetary values of the 4 factors of production?
Land, labor,
labor capital.
Yeah, those are the FOPs and the payments for them. How do we call the payments for land, labor, entrepreneurship, and
Wages?
yeah? So these are the wages,
Rent,
rent for land, profits for entrepreneurship. And we have one very interesting one for capital. Investment is actually what we do with that money. We invest, but we have to pay a cost for the investment, which is what? Interest rates. Actually, the interest is what we pay as a cost when we make a loan and when we invest. Good. So this expressing money. Okay. Now let's define revenues. How would you define total revenues? In your own words, your own definition of revenues. Michelle?
total money generated including costs.
Good, that's a good definition. The money that a firm receives or that a person receives, including the cost, by doing what? Where is the origin of revenues?
Goods and services.
Selling goods and services, isn't it? So let's put it, the amount of goods and services sold times what? Times the price of the goods and services sold, isn't it? And then we'll have a monetary value for total revenue. So price times quantity, and then we have the cost. So how will we define profits?
Revenue minus cost.
There we go. Total revenue minus total cost. So far we're gonna stick with this idea that the difference between total revenue minus total cost, we have a positive difference. Let's call it positive profits. Okay? Pi in microeconomics is gonna be profits from now on. Pi in macro is inflation. Okay?
What?
Yeah, if we have total revenue minus total cost as a negative value, it would be what? If the total revenue is lower than the total cost. Loss, we can say loss, isn't it? It's a loss, it's a negative. Okay. We're gonna get deeper into that in the next couple of weeks, but at least these definitions are gonna help for today. I'm gonna make a couple of decisions here in terms of costs. We have variable costs and fixed costs. And the idea of variable costs is that they are a function of the quantity produced. So if you produce something, you have to pay for these costs. If you don't produce anything, you don't pay for these costs. So what would be an example of some costs that are related with this idea of variable?
Like raw materials.
Raw materials for sure. That by definition, the raw materials are variable costs. Therefore, fixed costs, what comes to your mind? They are not a function, yeah. They don't depend on a quantity produced. And do we have an example of something that you may think that firms have to pay regardless the level of output? You still have to pay monthly for that even if you don't produce anything. Land sometimes, or rent sometimes, Subway is not opening today, but I have to pay the land of the restaurant anyways. So some type of cost can be fixed and some can be variable, but both of them are encompassing the total cost of a firm.
So is wage variable or fixed cost?
Good question. What do you think?
Variable.
Depends, okay? If wages are a function of the level of output, for example, have you seen those sweatshops that people produce clothing and they will pay you by the amount of clothes produced, then wages will be variable. But if you're paid per hour, let's say if I don't produce anything, I will still earn some money, then it will be a fixed cost. Does that make sense? So it depends on how are you paying the workers in that case. That we will actually get into that discussion later because some of you may be thinking about, are profits variable, are profits fixed, how about rent can be variable perhaps? So we may have some, sometimes any factor of production could be variable or could be fixed depending on how we pay for it. Okay, depending on the product that we're talking about.
But it's on jobs where you have like hourly wages, but the wages go up and down, and like promotions, demotions, I guess. Are those considered fixed or variable?
Good question. So wages can change, of course, but if they are changing not as a function of the level of output, but because of inflation or maybe the renegotiation of a contract, collective bargaining, whatever is happening that is making the wages to change, then that they are still fixed. Now we're talking about wages related to the level of output. If I was paid, for example, by student, then and if you were paid, that's a different situation because you're not paying, I'm not being paid by students, so it's a different situation. But we can make teaching a variable cost, or we can think as teaching as a fixed cost. Okay, so it can depend on how are we producing new education. Okay. Good. Any questions for with the big picture? Yeah.
But if you like want to expand your company, so you hire more people, then the wage becomes variable.
Good question. And actually, we will see that yes, it's true. If you're expanding your company and that's making you to produce more, then the cost of wages that otherwise were fixed are becoming variable.
Okay.
Good question. And actually, we'll get into there because that depends on when are you expanding your firm, and that's a different situation that we'll get later on.
Are corporate taxes considered variable or fixed?
Good question. Corporate taxes, if there are taxes on profits, they will be variable. If there are taxes that are fixed, then they will be fixed. Again, it depends on the level of output produced. Okay, good. Another question, we can go into questions towards this later because we'll go back to this, but at least so far to understand today, we may have these two costs together when we're producing what we will be producing in our factory. So the exercise today is to create a factory and produce something, and that something is these squares. Okay, super nice. You know, maybe the college is needing of money because never has money for anything, so maybe they need more money. They are buying these squares. I'm making it up. They are buying these squares. We're selling these squares to the college, and actually one of the representatives of the college is Stephanie. Okay, she will be buying these squares. Okay. Now these squares are pretty easy to do, as you can just tell. I hope that you can just make your mind of how to make it, but I'm gonna pass the prototype anyways, and you can figure out. You just need 3 materials. Well, you need 2 materials: tape and sticks. Okay. I will give you the raw material. We have plenty of this. Actually, we will create a circular economy because we will be using the same squares to dismantle them and use them again as raw materials. So no waste except for the small tape that we will not use anymore. And you will need labor for sure. Okay. And another factor of production that you will need is something to work on, which are the tables. Okay. So I will give you the value of the cost of all of these. That is going to be adding up to the total cost of production in your own factories. This class is not as big, so we'll have only 2 factories of around, I think, 6 workers per factory. And I will give you the pros of how this is going to work because we're going to learn a lot in how the structure of this exercise is. So you can pass it around. Perfect. So it's going to be you the only one buying, perhaps. I may help you because we will have even numbers. Okay? All we can show it. We can figure out that if you feel comfortable buying for both teams.
Yeah, it's just in the later rounds when there's more of them, it takes longer, that's all.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a double block today. We may not use the 2 blocks. We may just push the block to the latest and then we will leave early. That may happen. If you need to leave for some
I need to
reason.
leave at 2:40.
Okay, so we're good. We should be good.
I think that was yesterday, we worked out around that.
Okay, we should be good. Thank you. So a couple of things. I will give you the values of the costs, but so far you don't have to make any calculations. But just so you have an idea of how much is going to be costing to produce each of those squares, and I will give you the price of the squares as well. Okay. So far you don't have to pay me anything. Okay. You will actually receive money. You will receive a reward, but you don't have to pay anything from your pocket. Let's put here the cost of producing these guys. We have sticks. The wood sticks, they're gonna be 10 cents each. And because you need 4, okay, you cannot change that product because Stephanie will buy exactly this. Nothing less, nothing more. Actually, this is a prototype, you don't have to have anything written. We don't need this to be painted, we don't need your creativity. Don't be creative because she's buying only this square. That's what she needs, okay? Now, the criteria for her to buy the squares is that the square has to have the 2 sticks in the back and 2 in the front, so you cannot do it otherwise. It has to be relatively sturdy. Relatively, because if I do it harder, it will dismantle, okay? So make sure that at least she can wiggle like this. And it has to be symmetric, okay? It's a square, it's nothing like other than a square, okay? What else could be the other quality? Yeah, that is sturdy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. We're gonna recreate what the theory tells us that is a perfect competitive market. And we will learn later why we're doing, or how are we trying to do that. Because she's not buying anything else than the squares, and both of you are producing exactly the same product. So remember, one of the assumptions of perfect competitive market is that you're producing homogeneous products. And the other assumption of perfect competitive markets is that firms have a fixed price. Remember when we learned this, supply and demand and we have an equilibrium price. Actually, this equilibrium price is what firms are selling the goods for. And if a firms lower the price, they will lose money. And if firms increase the price, they will lose revenue. They will lose market. So we will learn that later. But actually, each firm has to adopt the price in which the market is telling us that it's willing to pay, not less and not more than that. So the price of each of these squares is going to be $2 per unit all the time. So you forget about price because you cannot negotiate price. The only thing that you will be rejected for or accepted for is the quality of the product. Sounds good? Good. Sticks are, yeah, go ahead.
So if the product is like a little bit worse, but like they still meet the qualifications, would it be like $2? And if the product was like really, really perfect, would it be like a little bit more than $2? Or is that like not?
So far, not. We're gonna check with a lot of assumptions that later we want to challenge because your assumption is right. You may say you just want to get rid of the imperfect ones, or you want to sell the other ones that look nicer at a higher price. So far, it's not gonna work here. Okay, and we'll learn why it should be consistent with the theory. Okay, that's our next class. But so far, then you cannot actually create something different than this and not selling it other than this price. So 4 sticks times 10 is 40 cents of sticks per square. Then you have tape. It's actually 5 cents per per unit that you are going to be using. And because we have 4 corners, you will need 4 units of tape. Okay, all the time. So it's gonna be always 20 cents of tape that you will need to produce the square. Does that make sense? You cannot use half of a tape or you cannot actually stick not in one corner. You have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if we can mingle.
No, you need to stick with this because the goods have to be again the same as the prototype, and the prototype is telling us is 1 piece of tape on each corner. If you do it usually
squares.
and if you do it otherwise, you will not accept it, so that's the problem. Okay, you may be creative, but creativity, this type of market kills creativity, by the way. Yeah, because you can be creative, you cannot be creative according to the assumptions of the market. Then we have, you're gonna use 1 table, just 1, unless you want to rent another one, but I don't suggest that at this point. The table is gonna be $1.50 per round, okay? And we may be able to do 6 rounds around, or 6 different rounds of production. What comes to your mind when you think about the rounds of production? What could be the analogy of each round?
Sure. Each year.
Each year, each week, each day. So a round is a period of time of production. So you have to pay always $1.50 per round. So what type of cost is this? Fixed, isn't it? Because you have to pay that anyways, even if you don't produce anything on each round. Okay? And the last one will be labor. I think we are in one country that actually labor is quite exploitation here because 40 cents per unit of labor. Okay? Again, this is gonna be fixed. If the person does not decide to work or the person produces a lot, still you're paying 40 cents per round. Okay?
For all of them or each?
For each worker.
So 40 cents per run can be per hour, or it's usually more than an hour?
Because the round is going to be only 4 minutes here in this example, so we may say 40 cents per 4 minutes is around the minimum wage in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have 6 people in each group,
Yes,
and do they all have to be worker or it's
good. Let's go to that part because so far, just want to I'm going to answer your question 1 second. So far, these 2 are what we call fixed costs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because table and labor are going to be always fixed regardless of the level of output. And otherwise, this is going to be variable. You don't produce anything, you don't pay for the sticks and the tape. Good.
So the labor cost is like for the labor to produce 1 square.
No, you can produce 20 squares or 1 square. It depends on how productive is the work.
So it's within the 1 round.
Yes, that's correct. Each round. And we'll see how many units you produce per round. The tricky part here, not the tricky part, maybe we're going to make it more interesting. The first round is going to be 1 worker. The second round, we're increasing workers. So as we increase rounds, we're going to increase an additional worker and an additional worker. So we expect the last round to produce more than the first round for sure. Okay, hopefully 2 people are more productive than this one. Okay, sounds good. So far, that's how it's gonna work. Once you start there producing outside, we're gonna do it outside. Thanks God, it's not raining. So we're gonna produce outside. We're gonna have a timer. You will start producing, and then we go to the next round, until we reach the 6 rounds and 6 people working each round. That's the big picture. Questions?
Wait, okay, let's say you are a worker. What is stopping you from just sitting there?
Good. That's a great question. Each team is going to be like a cooperative. Let's think about that this work, these wages, is actually your own payment because you are part of. It's like a co-op. Okay,
Oh.
you're not paying to someone else, but you're paying also to yourself when you start to work as well. So the 6 people are going to be workers, but also owners of the firm, because you will get at the end of the day your profits together as a team. So you're paying to yourself for your work, but also you will get profits if you are able to do this. Okay, to have a positive value here. Now, the first round that you have only one person working your team, the other 5 people around you cannot do anything. You can, they can do anything they want as long as they are not touching the FOPs. Okay, you cannot touch the factors of production. If any of the teams touches it, you're going to be disqualified. Okay, so you can chant, you can cheer, you can actually yell at the whoever, whatever you want to do, as long as you don't touch the factors of production. The last thing is that Stefan is going to be sitting in a certain table that you will see, and you're away, and the time of delivering is going to be counted in the 4 minutes that we have each round. So don't wait until the time is over to deliver, because that will not be counted as sold. And then Stephanie will decide how many she will buy and how many she will reject. If you produce at 5 and you sold 1, the cost of production of 5 will be counted, and the revenue will be $2. Sounds good? So you may be having losses. So you want to make sure that she will be buying as much as possible, or hopefully everything that you produce.
So she's gonna buy the ones that she thinks has good quality, or she's just gonna buy whatever she wants.
You
I'm
answer.
gonna buy ones that fit the 3 criteria.
Okay.
Square,
Oh, so as long as
aesthetically
it's-
pleasing, essentially, sturdy,
Symmetric.
and symmetrical.
Yeah.
So she's the theoretical demand consumer.
That is correct. Theoretical, and here will be in practice, so she will be the consumer. And because it's only one, it's going to be tricky for her because it can be overwhelming. But as long as you respect the division of the table, she won't be messy. It will be messy for her. Last thing this is the last thing before we go outside. Very important. Each table has already attached this sheet. This is the most important thing for the whole exercise, because you will record how many units were produced and delivered. So how many units you were putting on the table, and then here how many were accepted, how many were sold. So this is important because we want to see if this number matches. Okay, if you sell everything, that's great, but then we have some discrepancies. Your cost should be higher than your revenues if you sold less than the production.
Wait, so if we give the square to Stephanie and then Stephanie rejects it, could we take it back and fix it and then give it back to her? Or?
No, because the production time is over.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's like going to Walmart and you buy a Coca-Cola. You can exchange it later, but have to produce another Coca-Cola later. So you cannot fix it at this point. Okay, what is delivered and rejected is done. Okay, then you have to count as costs.
But that's
Okay,
not
as costs.
sustainable.
You may ask Stephanie why she's rejecting, because you need some feedback to do things differently in the next round. Sounds good? Okay. I'm gonna leave it here so far because you will actually learn by doing once we start. Let's number one and 2, and then once will be one team and the other 2. So maybe right. 1, 2.
1,
2, 1, 2, 2.
1, 2,
1,
2.
1, 2.
You remember your number, I hope. Number 1s are gonna be team A. Number 2s are gonna be team C. Why I'm putting C? Because you have more space between the 2 tables. Instead of having 3 teams, we have 2 teams. So team A, I think you will find your table there identified. That's number 1. You can go outside. I will bring all the factors to conclusion in 1 second. And team C is number 2s. Okay, so get ready. I will be there in 1 minute.
Is Team C also outside?
Yes, both teams are outside.
Not literally, not
Ship
hot factors.
battery.
You're used to